As with most projects, I started this one by sketching it out on paper so I can figure out what it's going to look like and kind of what features I wanted to add to it. A duffel bag is really just a simple project. It only requires 3 cuts of material plus whatever kind of features you're going to add to it, whether that be nylon webbing for handles or extra pockets, a liner, whatever you want to add to that. It's basically going to start with 3 pieces of material. Before making the cuts on the material, there were 2 measurements that I knew I would need to start with. The first being the length of the tent pole while it was collapsed, and that would determine the length of the entire bag. And I needed to know the circumference that I was going to be working with of the 2 side panels. I measured my tent pole, and if I remember right, it came out to be 17 7/8 of an inch, but I just rounded that up to 18 inches. Now, I don't have a compass. What I did instead was I just found some household objects, and I tried to find something round like a bowl or a plate, and I just measured that against the tent. This one worked pretty good, but I ended up deciding that I wanted the bag to be just a little bit bigger than the tent so I can stuff some extra gear in it. I know that I'm probably going to be adding a tent footprint in with the tent, and I wanted to keep that in the bag as well. So I found this bowl, and that was just a little bit bigger than the tent. So that should give me the space I needed. Now I'll demonstrate on paper, but I actually drew these patterns right onto my material. But basically I just took the bowl that I used and traced the outside of it onto the material using my pencil. After that, I knew once again that I would be working with a 3/8 seam allowance, so I wanted to add 3/8 all the way around the outside of that initial circle. Again, I didn't have a compass, but it's simple enough. All you have to do is line your ruler up on the edge of that line you drew, the edge of the ruler, and then just mark at 3/8 of an inch, just a small mark like that, and then move over a little bit and do the same thing, mark again. And I just ended up with a dotted line all the way around the outside of that initial circle at 3/8 of an inch. And all I had to do was cut the material out at that dotted line. It didn't have to be 100% perfect, because that was just going to be the seam allowance that was going inside the grosgrain ribbon. I also measured that circle that I drew and determined that at its widest it was right around 7 7/8 of an inch. And that gives me the diameter. So on a calculator, that 7 7/8 of an inch comes to 7.875. And now if you remember your basic math class from high school, the way you want to get the circumference is to multiply that diameter by pi, and that came out to about 24.74. So for the sake of ease, I rounded that slightly up to about 24 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so the way I made my bag was I came up with this formula that you're going to need to know if you want to kind of repeat my steps. Okay, start with the circumference of that initial circle that we just drew around that bowl. And you remember that comes to about 24 3/4 of an inch that we rounded it up to. So now you're going to want to take that circumference and subtract the width of the zipper tape that you're going to use. I was using number 10 nylon coil zipper again, and that's 1.5 inches wide. So I'm going to subtract that 1.5 inches from the circumference. Okay? And then after that, you're going to want to add some extra material. Now this extra material we'll be adding is because I like to cover all my zippers with this fold of material. So there's a very slight fold on the bottom and then this fold on the top that covers up the zipper. And we're going to account for that. Now I can reuse this mock-up that I made for the pouch I sewed a while ago. But instead of using it to determine the length of two different pieces of material, basically one side of the duffel is going to get sewn to one end of the zipper, then it's going to go all the way around and then come back and get sewn to the other side of the zipper. So we're only dealing with one piece of zipper tape and one piece of material. So basically what I need to do is measure from the edge of the zipper tape to the fold I'm going to make in the fabric. So it's going to go from the zipper tape to the fold, and then it's going to go all the way back around to the other side where the other fold is going to be, and then back to the other side of the zipper tape. And that's going to be the total length of the fabric. So I know that I need, from the zipper tape to the fold is about 3/8 of an inch. So I'll write that down. And then that's obviously going to be doubled. And then from the zipper tape to the edge of the other fold, here, let me see if I can focus this camera, we've got about 1.5 inches. Pardon me, that's going to be 1.25 inches. So 1 1/4 times 2. Okay, so that gives me 2.5 inches, and 3/4 of an inch is going to count for that extra bit of material that's going to cover the zipper. Okay, so I hope this is making sense, but the formula we're working with is going to be the circumference of the side panels, not including the seam allowance. We're not going to include the seam allowance, minus the width of our zipper, and then we're going to add the length of our folded material plus the other side of the folded material. So we're coming up with 24 3/4 of an inch minus the 1.5 inches of our zipper width, and then we're going to add 2.5 inches plus 3/4 of an inch to account for those folds. Okay, so after doing that math problem, we're going to come up with 26.5 inches, or 26.5 as it would be on the calculator, and that'll give us the dimensions we need for our pieces of material. We're going to have two pieces of material cut in a circle that are the size of that bowl that we used, plus our 3/8 inch seam allowance. And then our piece of material over here is going to be that 26.5 inches by 18 3/4 inches, because it's going to be 18 inches for the tent pole plus 3/8 inch seam allowance on each side is going to give us that 18 3/4 of an inch. I might have made a mistake up here in my math earlier. It might still be on video, but initially I said 18 inches plus the 3/8 of an inch, but I corrected that. It's 3/4 of an inch because, you know, you got 3/8 of an inch times 2. So 26.5 inches by 18 3/4. Now that you have some idea of how I came up with my own measurements, if you don't want to use those exact measurements I came up with, you can obviously use that same process to make a custom bag of whatever size you'd like to use. And hopefully that'll help you come up with the dimensions you need to come up with. We're obviously not 100% done yet, but just stay tuned for the next video, and I'll try to explain the rest of the process that I used to make this bag. Hopefully give you some ideas of how you might want to make yours.